Get your hands off me! I'm not doing anything wrong!
Put the phone away, now.
Let me go! Somebody help me!
You should have listened. Looks like you're on your own now.
Oh, God.
If you think you've seen a police confrontation get out of control, wait until you hear what happened after Maya Brooks was pushed over the barrier at a wildlife reserve. Because in the few seconds after her body slammed into the dirt, 3 officers who had been laughing behind the fence suddenly realized they had created a situation none of them could control, and the most shocking part wasn't that a massive silverback gorilla was only seconds away. It was what that gorilla appeared to notice before anyone else did. Maya had spent years speaking up when she saw people being treated unfairly. She wasn't looking for trouble that afternoon. She had simply pulled out her phone when she noticed 3 officers aggressively questioning a visitor near the entrance. She believed that if something happened in public, people deserved to know what really happened. That decision put her directly in the path of Officer Crane and his 2 partners. Put the phone away, Crane snapped. Maya lowered the phone slightly but didn't stop recording. I'm standing in a public area, she said calmly. I'm not interfering with you. That answer changed the temperature of the entire conversation. Crane stepped closer. You think you know your rights? Maya looked him directly in the eyes. I know enough not to be intimidated. For a moment nobody spoke. Then one of the officers glanced toward the restricted gorilla habitat behind Maya. His eyes returned to Crane. A small smile crossed Crane's face. Maya noticed, and something inside her told her to move. She took a step backward. Don't touch me. The second officer moved to her left. The third blocked the path behind her suddenly. Maya wasn't having a conversation with 3 officers anymore. She was surrounded. Give me the phone, Crane demanded. No, that single word was all it took. One officer grabbed Maya's arm. She pulled away. Get your hands off me. A nearby family turned toward the commotion. A child pointed. Someone raised a phone of their own. Maya's voice became louder. Somebody help me, but before anyone could reach her, Crane shoved her. Maya stumbled backward. Her heel caught the edge of the barrier. For one terrifying second she tried to regain her balance. She couldn't. Her body went over the railing. She hit the dusty ground. Inside the gorilla enclosure, with a violent thud, her phone flew from her hand. The world seemed to stop. Maya lay there stunned, struggling to breathe as dust floated around her. Behind the fence, the officers stared down at her, and then they laughed. That laughter would later become one of the most important pieces of evidence in the entire story. Maya slowly pushed herself onto one elbow. Her eyes burned, her hand shook. She looked toward the officers, expecting at least one of them to realize how badly the situation had gone wrong. Instead, Crane folded his arms. You shouldn't have resisted, he called. Maya couldn't believe what she was hearing. She had been pushed into a restricted animal enclosure, and the people responsible were treating it like entertainment. Then she heard something, a deep, heavy sound behind her, not a shout. Not an alarm, a low vibration that seemed to travel through the ground. Maya stopped breathing. She slowly turned her head. Beyond the trees stood a massive silverback. He was enormous. His shoulders seemed wider than the enclosure gate, his arms hanging with unbelievable weight, silver fur covering his powerful back. He wasn't rushing, he wasn't making noise, he was simply watching. Maya's fear intensified behind the fence. Crane's confidence returned. Looks like she finally has something to worry about, he said. But Crane had made one mistake. He was watching Maya. The silverback wasn't. The gorilla's eyes had shifted toward the 3 officers, and as Maya slowly tried to crawl away from the center of the enclosure, the massive animal took one deliberate step forward, his knuckles pressing into the dirt as the officers' laughter began to disappear, and the first unmistakable sign of fear crossed Crane's face. The silverback took another step. Maya's heart slammed against her ribs. For a moment she couldn't move, every survival instinct inside her screamed to run, but somewhere beneath the panic was another voice telling her that sudden movement could make everything worse. She pressed her palms into the dirt and slowly backed away. The gorilla lowered his head. Then he charged. Dust exploded beneath his enormous hands and feet. Maya screamed and covered her face. Behind the fence, the officers stopped laughing. The massive silverback crossed the enclosure with terrifying speed. 5 seconds earlier, Crane had looked completely confident. Now he was gripping the fence with both hands, his face drained of color. "Back up," one officer shouted, but Maya had nowhere to go. The gorilla was almost on top of her. 3 feet 2 feet, then he stopped. Maya slowly opened her eyes. The silverback stood directly in front of her, enormous and motionless. She could hear his breathing. She could see the dust settling across his dark fur. He looked at her for several seconds. Maya expected violence. Instead, something completely different happened. The gorilla turned his head toward the fence. Toward the officers. Maya followed his gaze. Crane was still staring at her, but his expression had changed. The confidence was gone. The silverback stepped sideways. His massive body moved between Maya and the officers, creating a living wall of muscle and silver fur. Maya's eyes filled with tears. She didn't understand what was happening, but she understood one thing. The animal everyone expected to be her greatest danger was no longer focused on her. He was watching the men who had put her there. One of the officers nervously stepped toward the fence. The silverback immediately raised his head. A deep rumble came from his chest. The officer stopped. Crane whispered, "Don't move," for the first time. The 3 men appeared to understand the reality of their situation. They had believed Maya was powerless because she was alone. They had believed a badge gave them control. They had believed the fence protected them, but now the same fence that had made Maya helpless was separating them from something they couldn't intimidate, threaten, or order around. Maya slowly looked toward her phone. It had landed several feet away. The screen was cracked, but the camera light was still blinking. Her eyes widened. The recording was still running. She reached toward it, then stopped. The silverback's eyes briefly moved toward her hand. Maya froze. She didn't want to make a sudden movement. She whispered softly, almost to herself, "I'm not going to hurt you." The gorilla remained still. Maya took another slow breath. Then another. She began inching toward the phone. Behind the fence, Crane noticed. "Hey, leave that phone." Maya looked up. His voice was no longer confident. It was desperate. That told her everything. The phone wasn't just a phone anymore. It was evidence. It was a voice. It was proof of what happened when nobody believed a black woman standing in front of a badge. Maya reached the phone and carefully picked it up. The screen displayed the recording timer. Still running, her fingers trembled. She looked at the silverback. Then at the officers, and for the first time since she had fallen into the enclosure, Maya felt something stronger than fear. She felt determination. She had spent years believing that courage meant never being afraid. Now she understood something different. Sometimes courage is being terrified, knowing you're vulnerable and still refusing to surrender your voice. That lesson matters far beyond Maya's story. Police officers are entrusted with extraordinary authority because communities need protection, order, and accountability, but a badge should never become permission to humiliate the people it is supposed to protect. And Maya's refusal to be silenced was not about fighting the police. It was about demanding that authority answer for its actions. If you believe every person deserves to be heard, especially when they feel powerless, subscribe to the Justice Verdict, because stories like this remind us that dignity doesn't disappear just because someone in uniform tells you it should. Maya pressed the phone against her chest. Then Crane made a terrible decision. He reached toward the enclosure gate. The silverback immediately noticed his shoulders rose. His massive hands pressed into the dirt. Maya looked from the gorilla to the officer and realized Crane wasn't trying to help her anymore. He was trying to get inside. Crane reached toward the enclosure gate and Maya's entire body went still. The silverback noticed the movement before she did. His head snapped toward the officer. Then his shoulders rose. A deep rumble rolled through the enclosure. Crane froze for several seconds. Nobody moved. Maya could hear the distant voices of visitors, the faint crackle of radios, and the heavy breathing of the animal standing between her and the fence. Then Crane made the mistake that changed everything. "Open that gate," he ordered one of the officers. The other officer hesitated. "Are you sure?" "Just do it." Maya looked at the phone in her hand. The recording was still running. She turned the camera toward the fence. Now she was recording everything. Crane's face, his officers, the gate, and the enormous silverback standing between them. "You need to put that phone down," Crane shouted. Maya's voice was quiet. No one word, but this time it wasn't fear speaking, it was courage. Crane's jaw tightened. You have no idea what you're doing. Maya looked directly at him. I know exactly what I'm doing. The Silverback shifted again. His massive frame moved closer to the fence. Crane instinctively stepped backward. That single movement said more than any confession could have. Minutes earlier he had been laughing, now he was retreating. Maya noticed, so did everyone watching. And somewhere outside the enclosure, a visitor had already called the wildlife staff. A distant alarm suddenly sounded, then another rangers were coming. Crane heard the sirens and immediately changed his tone. She entered the enclosure on her own. He shouted. Maya stared at him in disbelief. You pushed me. No one pushed you. You pushed me. I told you to stay back. Maya raised the phone higher. You're on camera. Crane's face changed. For the first time he realized the truth. His badge couldn't erase a recording. His authority couldn't rewrite what dozens of witnesses had seen. And the story he had created was beginning to collapse in real time. The Silverback released another deep warning growl. The officers stepped farther away. Maya slowly backed toward the emergency section of the enclosure while keeping her eyes on the animal. She didn't know whether she would ever fully understand why he had stopped. Maybe he sensed her fear. Maybe he reacted to the officer's movements. Maybe it was simply an animal defending its territory. Whatever the reason, Maya knew one thing: she was alive and she had proof. That was enough. The first ranger appeared at the outer gate. Then another. Everyone stepped back. The officers immediately began talking over one another. She trespassed. She climbed in. She refused to cooperate, but Maya's phone kept recording. Every contradiction, every excuse, every nervous glance. Then the senior ranger noticed the Silverback. He stopped in his tracks. The animal wasn't attacking Maya. It was positioned between her and the officers. The ranger lowered his voice. Stay calm. We are going to get you out. Maya nodded. She held the phone against her chest. I have the recording. The ranger looked at the officers. Then back at Maya. Keep it safe. Those 3 words nearly broke her. Because after everything that had happened, someone finally believed her. Not because she was louder. Not because she had influence. Not because she had power. Because she had the truth, and that is something worth remembering. A person's dignity shouldn't depend on whether someone in authority decides to respect them, and being a black woman standing alone against intimidation should never mean that your voice matters less. At the same time, this story isn't about declaring every police officer a villain. The vast majority of officers understand that their badge carries responsibility, restraint, and a duty to protect. That's precisely why abuse of authority is so serious. When someone entrusted with protection chooses intimidation instead, it damages the trust between law enforcement and the community they serve. Maya slowly moved toward the emergency gate. The Silverback followed. Step by step, he never touched her, he never attacked. He simply remained between her and the men who had put her in danger. The gate opened. A ranger reached through. Come on. Slowly. Maya stepped forward 1 foot. Then another. She crossed the threshold. The moment she was safely outside, the ranger pulled the gate shut. Maya collapsed against the railing, tears streaming down her face. She looked down at her phone. The recording was still there. Then she heard the Silverback behind the fence. One final thunderous roar echoed across the reserve. Everyone turned toward him. Maya wiped her tears and looked back. For a moment she simply stood there. She had entered that enclosure believing she had been completely powerless. She walked out knowing something different. Power isn't always the person wearing the badge. Sometimes power is the person who refuses to surrender her truth. Sometimes courage is simply surviving the moment that was designed to break you. And sometimes the most unforgettable lesson comes from the place nobody expected it. If Maya's story made you stop and think, tell me in the comments. What do you think the Silverback's behavior meant, and what would you have done if you were in Maya's position? And I want to hear from you beyond this story too. What kind of justice story should the justice verdict bring you next? A corrupt officer exposed by his own body camera footage. A black woman falsely arrested who turns the entire case around. Or a story where an ordinary person finally stands up to someone abusing their authority. Write your choice below. Because here at the Justice Verdict, we don't just tell stories about conflict. We tell stories about courage, accountability, dignity, and the moment ordinary people decide they will not be silenced. If you believe every person deserves to be treated with dignity, regardless of their race, their position, or the uniform standing in front of them, stay with us. Subscribe to the Justice Verdict, and remember, sometimes justice begins with one person finding the courage to say no more.